welcome to this webinar about addressing the urgent need for quality K-12 science materials. So again, feel free to drop in any identifying information about yourself, give everybody a welcome, and thanks everyone for spending some of your evening with us. Before we jump in this evening, I want to take a minute to acknowledge our guest speakers and behind the scenes folks. Joining us to share her perspective around high quality instructional materials and the role teachers play is Tricia Shelton. Tricia is the Chief Learning Officer at the National Science Teaching Association. And we also have Minna Turrell, the Secondary Science Consultant for the St. Clair County Regional Education Service Agency in Michigan. Minna has served on several EdReports science review teams and will be sharing her experiences around being a reviewer, along with the impacts of the professional learning that she received through that experience. Behind the scenes is self-described chat person Sam Shaw. Sam is the director for the science team here at EdReports, and I'm Shannon Wachowski, and I'm the specialist on the science team. So let's dive in. During the webinar today, we'll give an overview of EdReports and our review process, hear from experts about the importance of high quality materials, share information about the high school review development process, and discuss opportunities for you to get involved. Today's presentation can be accessed at the link on the slide, which Sam is going to drop in the chat for us. So please feel free to side chat Sam if you have any trouble accessing the deck. And also feel free to use the Q&A feature to post questions. We'll attempt to answer them through the Q&A system during the webinar, but we'll also be sending out a follow-up email after the webinar. And I see Sam just dropped that slide in, or that chat link in for everybody. So let's start with an overview of EdReports. EdReports is an independent nonprofit designed to improve K-12 education. Our organization increases the capacity of teachers, administrators, and leaders to seek, identify, and demand the highest quality instructional materials. Drawing upon expert educators, our reviews of instructional materials and support of smart adoption processes equip teachers with excellent materials nationwide. At EdReports, we prioritize high-quality instructional materials as a lever for equity, ensure that local context and instructional vision are valued, engage and prioritize diverse stakeholders, center the needs of all students, especially those who have been least well served, provide information about instructional materials and selection processes, not recommendations, and work alongside and in collaboration with our partners, ensuring services are tailored to specific needs. EdReports' theory of action consists of 4 main tenets: identifying excellence in instructional materials, which leads to increasing demand for excellence and improvement of materials, all of which supports better outcomes for students. We believe that reliable information against quality criteria in a quickly changing marketplace helps educators make informed purchasing decisions and improve student learning. We are not making recommendations or telling you what to do. We are sharing the voices of educators just like you, who are empowering you to make great decisions for your classroom, your school, and your district. As you can see, EdReports is making an impact in the field. We've had multiple publishers express interest in making revisions and undergoing re-review. For example, Amplify is currently undergoing a re-review for grades K through 5, and Discovery Education recently completed a re-review, moving from Gateway 1 to Gateway 2 after revisions. We're in conversations with multiple other programs about subsequent re-review as we monitor their timeline and scope of changes to their programs. What you select and how you select matters, and the selection process is a critical lever for ensuring that quality materials are adopted and then used well in classrooms. Districts, schools, and teachers must demand and advocate for materials that align with the shifts called for in the framework for K-12 science education and other research-based documents. We've heard from the field that current adoption processes are lacking due to several factors, time and resources, to name a few. So at EdReports, our goal is to provide information and resources to support smart adoption processes. In fall of 2021, EdReports released a K-12 data snapshot around the availability and use of K-12 science curriculum. Data from the nationally representative RAND American Instructional Resources Survey and other research informed the report. I've pulled a couple of images from the report that relate to teacher use of materials and support around the use of materials. Take a moment to reflect on the images and our chat question. So in the chat, what resonates with you? Does this data relate to your current experience? How? So I'll give everyone a minute to type a response in the chat and take a look at some of the data that we've presented. So taking a look at that data, 42% of science teachers regularly use materials they create themselves. Does that relate to you? I know it relates to me from my experience in the classroom, using use of pre-standards materials, thinking about the amount of time spent on professional learning and what opportunities you might be receiving and what you'd like to receive. What kind of resonates with you in this? Yeah, and Celine making a great comment too about knowing your local context, right, and how that relates. Nice, I see some comments about professional learning and some great wonderings too. Awesome, so please keep those comments coming. Thank you all for sharing your experiences and perspectives. So now I'd like to pass things off to Tricia Shelton to share more about the importance of high quality instructional materials and the role that educators can play.
Thanks so much, Shannon, and so glad to be here tonight with everybody and to share a little bit of my road around high quality instructional materials. I was really blessed to have an opportunity to write for the Journal of Science Teacher Education. I was able to write a commentary that focused on 4 research articles from different groups focused on high quality instructional materials, and that led me to this opportunity. And so I'll be referencing that a little bit tonight. And in that JSTE article, I expressed my tremendous appreciation in terms of instructional materials, but also for the progress made so far, but I also acknowledged where we may have more work to do. So in thinking about that, I wanted to start at the beginning here with my story. So this is the reason that I do this particular work. Shannon, I think my remote control is not working. I'm really sorry, everybody.
No worries. That was just.
There we go.
Okay.
Got it now. Thank you so much. So here's the center of my story. This is a shot from the hallway right outside my classroom from back near when the standards came out. And these are some of my tremendous students. And they were the center of my world and the center of everything I did. And I was one of the teachers that really geeked out and read all of the standards drafts that came out, and was really, really excited to walk down this new road. And at about that same time, there was a lot of changes within my building that really allowed students to have a lot more opportunity to, we became bring your own device school. Kids were allowed to jump on Twitter and interact with other classrooms. So it was that perfect time to really try to put that new vision for teaching and learning into practice in the classroom. And so at about the same time, I wasn't on social media, no Facebook, no Twitter. It just, for some reason, it just wasn't anything that I ever did, if people can believe that now. And so I got on Twitter because my students asked me to. How can we use Twitter in our classroom to do these new science things? And I got on NGSS chat to learn more about the NGSS and how we might do that together. And so that was definitely the beginning of my story. That led me to quickly see that I needed other teachers and other people throughout the country to do this well, these new complex standards. And I really gravitated towards Achieve and the Next Gen Science in the Equip rubric. And I actually wrote my very first NGSS lesson. It took me over 60 hours in the summer when I wasn't teaching. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, how am I going to continue to do this throughout the entire year? But that work, by reaching out and collaborating with other educators around the country, actually connected me to so many people that I was able to learn so much. And my students and I, we decided that as we saw significant shifts in our classroom through all of our, what we called experimenting, that we really felt like we wanted more classrooms to look and feel like ours did. And we put ourselves out there and often invited people into our classroom. And so you see there, that bottom picture is actually a snapshot from the Teaching Channel video where we allowed that film crew come in to see our bright spots, but also our challenges and our struggles with NGSS implementation as we started to walk that road. And eventually I ended up here at NSTA, which I feel very, very honored and fortunate to work at an organization that is in many ways the voice of teachers throughout the country. And so what part of that work still allows me to do a lot of national work and to partner with a lot of who I call the NGSS rock stars. And one of them, Oki Lee, and I have done some presentations where we've really talked about research policy and practice. And so this particular slide is our representation of prior to the NGSS and the framework, what that may have looked like and felt like. There wasn't a lot of synergy amongst those areas, but if we jump ahead to, I'm so sorry, Shannon. If we jump ahead to after the NGSS and K-12 science education, this has really been a powerful time for research, policy, and practice all working together and really amplifying the importance of this new vision for all kids in science education. And so what I really want to focus on, since I'm a teacher that came out of the classroom and now I work for the National Science Teaching Association, is that practice piece. And the center of my JSTE commentary, the title of it was called Teachers at the Table. And one of the things that I'm the most thankful for with the new standards and the framework vision is that teachers were at the table from the very beginning. When other teachers like me all over the country started inviting people into their classrooms, it really gave people a lens into the work going on to translate these standards into instruction. And the leaders around NGSS, they saw that they needed teachers and students and school leaders to be able to, they were the ones digging into this work to translate that into instruction. And we know that that often looked like moving from the information frame that I experienced school and which trained in my pre-service towards this sense-making frame. And that transition takes grace and space and time and collaborators. And it really, for me, I had to flip a lot of things that I was doing upside down. And that's what I learned as I started collaborating throughout the country. And that was a really, really big lift for me. And going back to my comment about it took me 60 hours to write that very first unit, this is what it felt like for me without high quality instructional materials. And so what I've talked a lot about over the past couple of years is how integral they are for teachers to be able to shift their practice in this beautiful vision that is centering all of its attention on how we can provide opportunities for every single student in our classroom and those pedagogy shifts that are necessary to accomplish that. And so what I found with high quality instructional materials, that it was what saved me and allowed me to really shift my practice and have materials that are not only aligned to the standards, but supporting that journey, that curriculum-based professional learning journey. And the way that I got involved initially with high quality instructional materials was by taking a seat at that national table and putting myself out there to test a lot of those out in the classroom. So if we jump ahead from, the mid, like the 2014, 2015, 2016 range that I was speaking about with the beginning of my professional career that led me here, we recently, this fall, did a survey at NSTA where teachers, they spoke to us very clearly, sharing their thinking about what the biggest barriers to their work with their standards, with the policy, with the research, with that focus on equity. And here's word clouds from both elementary and middle school teachers that shows what they told us. And so notice how many times in different ways instructional materials and curriculum and resources come up in these particular word clouds. Also, in this survey, they shared several important messages to leaders. And if you notice on these slides, the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine are pictured here. These were slides that were part of the 3D Summit that happened in October and December this fall. So I really encourage you to check that out if you haven't. But these were the messages that also came out from teachers for leaders about how they're feeling right now about science education. And they're not in any particular order, but again, notice that alignment and coherence of materials, professional learning, resources, and teacher supports that are very directly tied to the vision of the framework and the standards. So as I indicated earlier, that I have deep appreciation for the progress that we've made, but there's still more work to be done. And so I was excited to share at this web seminar, what I know is we look forward in what's coming, that you're going to get to hear from Minna about her experience being a reviewer and how she uses that as her professional learning that benefits herself and also those around her. But I wanted to parallel that I had a really similar road. And I want to encourage everybody in the audience tonight to consider how you can take a seat at this table, because it's work that we really need teachers reviewing, and the professional learning that comes with that is one way, but also using the materials that are out there, especially those that Shannon highlighted, and sharing your experience with those materials and sharing back to the developers about what's working for you and where the challenges are, because we have more work to do, and that teacher seat is critically important. So with that, I'll turn it back to Shannon, and thank you so much for the invitation tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trish, for sharing your perspective. We really appreciate it. So now that we've given an overview of EdReports and our mission and talked about the importance of high quality instructional materials, we want to dig into the 5 key components of the EdReports review process, just to really give you some background and context. So let's first talk about the tools we use for the reviews. EdReports tools were created through work digging into existing tools in the field and connecting to experts across the country. So we first looked at resources already in the field, such as EQUIP, PEAK, Next Gen Time, guidelines for evaluating instructional materials in science, and several others. We also conducted a virtual listening and learning tour where we interviewed a lot of people in the field about what was most important about the framework and the NGSS creation process. They also helped us think about challenges and priorities for implementation. And this included educators and researchers involved in the development of the framework and NGSS, state and district leaders involved in NGSS adoption and implementation, and educators currently involved in instructional materials review. We sought information on what we should be looking for, how we should be doing it, and how we could support reviewers. And this first gave us our priorities for review to develop the tool and evidence guide. We also received regular advice and feedback from our advisory panel and utilized an Anchor Educator working group as we developed and revised the tools and began the reviews. Both groups consist of educators and other science experts with a wide range of perspectives and experiences. EdReports reviews on a gateway system across all subject areas. We want to send a signal about alignment to the standards before we talk about usability. The first two gateways really focus on what NGSS is about. So Gateway 1 focuses on three-dimensional learning and phenomena and problems driving learning. Gateway 2 focuses on coherence and scope of the three dimensions and scientific accuracy. Gateway 3 is similar across all of the content areas that EdReports reviews and focuses on usability features of the materials. So the way this works is that we review programs starting in Gateway 1. If phenomena and problems or three-dimensional learning aren't present in the materials, they don't move on to Gateway 2. Materials have to meet or partially meet expectations for Gateway 1 before they can move on to Gateway 2. To proceed to Gateway 3, materials have to fully meet in Gateway 1 and Gateway 2. This is meaningful because we say materials must fully meet expectations for alignment to the standards before we review for usability features. After we completed the first middle school reviews, we repeated the tool development process for K-5, getting input on where the tools for each grade band are similar and where there needed to be differences. For high school, we have completed the process of conducting interviews and focus groups related to the development of the tool. The final draft of the tool will be provided to publishers this month to aid in procurement of materials, and reviews are anticipated to start in May of this year. You can find our K-5 and 6-8 tools on the EdReports website under the Report Center tab. These include the review criteria and evidence guide for each grade band, and the list of codes used when citing elements of each dimension. The tools for high school will look similar to the tools for K-5 and 6-8, with some modifications as a result of what we learned during the Listening and Learning Tour and Anchor Educator Working Group related to the nuances of reviewing a single course. And we'll get into those modifications in just a little bit. The review criteria document provides an overview of what we look for, including each indicator, possible score, and then score ranges for whether materials meet, partially meet, or do not meet a gateway. The evidence guide provides more detailed information about what the reviewers actually look for and how each indicator is scored. For each indicator, scoring guidance and relevant research is provided, and there are also statements to guide the reviewers while they collect evidence, as well as questions to consider during their weekly team calls as they determine a consensus score for each indicator. The evidence guide can be a really valuable tool for interpreting and understanding the reasoning behind scores on reports, so keep it in mind when you're looking at reports on the website. Once the review criteria and evidence guide have been developed, the second step in our review process is to recruit and train reviewers. We accept applications for reviewers year-round, but typically interview 2 or 3 times per year. And we're currently reviewing for all grade bands with a specific focus on high school as we get closer to the launch of high school instructional materials review. Reviewers get extensive training during the review process, typically through an in-person or virtual training at the beginning of the review, and then e-learning modules for each indicator throughout the process. And in addition, there is a ton of collaborative learning that occurs within the review team, and you'll hear a little bit more about reviewers from Minna. Once we have a pool of qualified reviewers, the third step is to conduct the review with a team of educators. So each team consists of 5 members, 1 facilitator, and 3 reviewers who collect evidence during the review, and 1 writer who writes the reports based on the evidence the rest of the team has collected. For K-8 reviews, there is 1 team for each grade band, and in high school, this will be 1 team per course level program. It is anticipated that reviewers spend 5 to 10 hours per week collecting evidence, including a 1 hour per week team meeting. And overall, the review process takes approximately 4 to 6 months to complete. The fourth step is to engage with publishers, and there are several points in the process where we communicate. So before the review starts, we provide each publisher the opportunity to provide an orientation to the materials, so reviewers understand overall program design and where different program elements and resources are located. And we may also reach out to publishers during the review process if the review team has questions or needs clarification about the program. Once the reviews are complete and the team finishes the reports, we share the draft reports with the publisher, giving them the opportunity to point out anything they think is an error or omission. This publisher feedback is then reviewed by the review team and may result in changes to the reports and/or the scores. Publishers can also provide a response to our reviews, which we post on our website alongside the review. So this takes us to the last step in the process, which is to release our free, publicly available reports that provide educators with detailed evidence to support the selection of high-quality materials. So you can view the reports in two different ways. From the Report Center, you can view all of the reports by content area, sorted in a number of different ways. And you can also go to Compare Materials, where you can see how the different programs scored in each gateway. It's important to really look beyond just that color rating and dig deeper into the score within the range, and then really look at the evidence within the actual report. In addition to the overall alignment, each report includes a gateway summary for each gateway, a criterion level summary for each rating sheet, and a detailed report for each indicator. So the indicator level report will provide specific examples on how the materials meet, partially meet, or do not meet the indicator. And if you're on the website, you'll just need to click on the indicator in order to expand that section of the report, or you can also just expand the entire thing and have all of the indicators there for you, but lots of information provided in that report. So thinking about that, and now that we've discussed the overall process, let's think about how this might connect in your context. So given your school, district, and/or state timelines, what could be most helpful to you right now? So currently, most middle school programs have been reviewed and their reports are on the website. And we're in the process of continuing reviews for K-5 and middle school and are getting ready to launch high school instructional materials review. So given this current state where there aren't reviews out about everything, how can the reports on EdReports website support you in building capacity, as well as understanding gaps in current curricula and making necessary adaptations for your context? So in the chat, consider what support do you need to use these reports? How might these reports help you make informed decisions given the capacity and vision for science education in your context? And I'll give everybody a minute to put some reflections and responses in the chat. Really thinking about, how you might use this information. There's a lot of information out there. And I think there were some previous comments too in the chat about context and, knowing what's like best for your students. And so how can you take this information and use that to benefit your students? When I see some good suggestions too on how to use reports better, which we are always looking for also, so awesome. Yep, different processes, yeah, and being able to dig into specific indicators, and especially thinking about needs in your district or for your students, and then focusing in on the indicators that are going to give you the most information. All right, so we're gonna, I'll let everyone keep putting in the chat, and we're gonna also attempt to address questions in the chat as we go along too. And then just as a side note, any questions that we don't get to, we'll make sure to follow up within our email that's gonna be coming out as well. All right, so next, I'd like to give Minna an opportunity to kind of share a little bit about her perspective and how she has taken what she's learned and put it into her own district. So Minna, I don't think you have any slides, so I'm just going to stop share so we can see you instead. And I'll give you the floor.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Shannon. So my name is Minna Turrell. I am a supervisor of secondary science instruction in St. Clair County, Michigan. My dogs have been quiet this whole time, so I thoroughly plan for them to bark at some point during this, so I apologize in advance. I was a high school science teacher for 12 years. The NJSS were adopted in Michigan in 2015, and I actually left the classroom in 2016 Those two things are not related. But I was actually appointed to be the basically the supervisor of science instruction for the county that I was teaching in. I had what I thought was a really great wealth of knowledge about NGSS going into that position. I was helping teachers learn about NGSS and the shifts and all of it. And so then they all turned to me and said, well, where are the materials? What can we see that will show us how this looks? And I told them, well, there aren't any. But you just have to trust me. It's like I asked them to go jump off a cliff and I would throw them a parachute when it was ready. So that was pretty terrible. And then in early 2018, I got an email about this group named EdReports, and they were looking for people to review science materials. And I'm like, I need to be a part of this. And so I applied and, I accepted. I was chosen to be a facilitator in the inaugural science group. I've done several reviews to this point, and just let me say that it has been the best professional learning that I've done for myself in my own career, being a reviewer for EdReports. I received, 20 plus hours of training. We were all brought together to do our initial training. I've attended multiple summer trainings. There's always more to learn, and there's always great conversations to be had. EdReports has really pushed my definitions of 3D learning and phenomenon and problems beyond anything that I ever thought that I really knew. And just the whole process of being on a review team and having these conversations and really diving into materials has helped further my understanding, and then has helped in turn me help the districts in my county. There's been so many benefits for me. The way that I take that back to my own context is I work with multiple districts, and I'm in classrooms doing a lot of coaching, and I am, helping these districts through their adoption processes. And I can tell you that high quality instructional materials are absolutely critical. They're needed. There's no question, but it is not enough. And so in my experience, teachers need those resources. They also need ongoing, consistent professional learning. They need classroom coaching. Teachers constantly come to me and say, like, why are you here? Am I doing something wrong? And I tell them all the time, the best athletes in the world, they all have coaches. Everybody needs a coach. And so through what we call my EdReports lens, I help my curriculum directors through the entire adoption process. We look at materials, those that have been reviewed, we dive into the EdReports and we look at what's there and what's maybe not there. If a material, like we have a few local resources in Michigan, so we've, kind of gone through the process of looking at some of the indicators and talking through what we are noticing during that pilot process. Kind of sticking in Gateway 1, looking at that three-dimensionality, looking at, the use of phenomena and problems, but really just helping districts identify any gaps in a material. How can we fill that gap? There's no perfect resource. EdReports is 100% a tool, and you should use it as that. It is data to be analyzed when you're making decisions, but it's not the decision made for you. You have to look at your teachers, what experiences they have, and use that, in making those decisions. I always joke with people, if I had $1 for every time I was in a conversation with Sam Shaw and one of us said, this is really hard work, I could solve all the problems in education. But I don't. So it is really hard work. Being a reviewer, it's 5 to 10 hours per week. It's a lot more hours at the beginning, a lot more closer to that 10 than the 5. But as you get into the resource and you kind of know how it's laid out and how it works, the time spent during the review, often the indicators piggyback on one another. So, the time doesn't become quite so, daunting, but it is by far, although hard work, the best work that I have done for myself and in my local context. And so piggybacking on what Tricia said about taking a seat at the table, this is an awesome opportunity to come sit at this table and be a part of this work, and you will not regret it. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Minna, for sharing your perspective. Let me go back to my screen share. Awesome. All right, so now that we've done some thinking around high quality instructional materials and how EdReports reviews can support your work, we want to provide an update about the upcoming review of high school instructional materials. So to begin the process of preparing for review of high school instructional materials, we engaged in some pre-learning and some pre-thinking. So the pre-learning process consisted of conducting a landscape scan where we collected information from the field about high school graduation requirements, course enrollment, and course descriptions. We also reviewed research to better understand the current state of adoption and use of high school instructional materials. We learned that high school programs are selected by content area rather than grade band as for K-8. And additionally, we learned that the number of credits and courses offered by schools and districts really varies greatly. We also noticed that there is significant variation in the courses offered, their descriptions, and which courses students take, as well as the sequence in which they are taken. So lots of differences. So to prioritize which courses will be reviewed, we're using enrollment data as well as information collected from our listening and learning tour. The pre-thinking phase included deciding to use the existing K-8 tools as a foundation from which to build the high school tool. We also engaged in internal conversations to determine lessons learned and lessons that we can apply from the 6-8 and K-5 tool builds. After conducting the landscape scan to gather general information and determine areas of focus, we engaged stakeholders in a listening and learning tour to gain a wider perspective on the issues surrounding a high school science instructional materials review. So through our science advisory panel, stakeholders who participated in the listening and learning tour, and focus groups with educators, we learned that there is alignment with our current review practices. Due to this finding, the high school review tools and processes will be very similar to the K-8 process. So this will support continuity in decision-making for school districts who use our tools. In addition to our current tools aligning with current needs around instructional materials, we also noticed 5 key considerations specifically related to high school science. So these themes were included in our work around the high school review tools and could also lead to opportunities to consider continual improvement for K-8 reviews. So theme 1, based on the popularity of a biology course offering, we have decided to start the high school instructional review process with biology. So after the inaugural review, we'll make additional course review decisions based on impact to the field. And our goal is to make the tool robust enough that it can be used for review of any NGSS-aligned high school course. Student-facing coherence and equitable learning opportunities were also common themes that surfaced. Key considerations include placing greater attention on coherence from the student perspective, starting with indicators related to phenomena and problems driving learning. So currently in our K-8 reviews, we look at coherence not only across units in a grade, but also across grades within a band. Since the high school review will focus on a single course, we plan to look for coherence more within a unit and then across units in the course. So while Gateway 3, which focuses on usability, includes indicators that address equitable learning opportunities, we've also identified points earlier in the tool where evidence can be collected around this theme to provide information to the field. There are several indicators in Gateway 1 of the K-8 tool that provide information related to equitable learning opportunities, related to how students make sense of phenomena and solve problems. So as we built the high school tool, we incorporated ways to expand and leverage those opportunities within Gateway 1. The 4th theme includes the role of phenomena and problems in driving instruction, specifically with reference to the relevance and types of phenomena. So in our current K-8 tools, the reports mostly focus on different aspects of how students interact with phenomena and problems and how they're used to drive student learning. During the listening and learning tour, we learned that it was important to keep this emphasis but we also heard that it would be helpful if the reports provided more information about the relevance and or identified the types of phenomena used in the materials, such as culturally meaningful and justice-centered topics. We also received feedback that the report should provide more information about how phenomena and problems can be used to support student interest and identity. So this feedback has been incorporated into different indicators within the high school tool. Finally, the last theme centers around the use of a claims-based approach to specifically meet the needs of a high school review. This involves EdReports confirming claims made by publishers around NGSS alignment and learning objectives. So specifically, we're considering including a visual way to represent which elements of the DCIs, SEPs, and CCCs are claimed, and of those claims, which are found to meet, partially meet, or not meet. So this is going to be different from current K-8 reviews, as in those reviews, we look for the presence of all elements within that grade or grade band. In a high school biology course, for example, not all 912 standards would be addressed, and so a claims-based approach makes more sense here. So now that we've piqued your interest by sharing our plans for the high school review, you might be wondering, well, how do I get involved? Well, here's what's next. So based on feedback from the Anchor Educator Working Group, our science advisory, and internal conversations, we've completed a draft of the high school review tools. We are planning to pass it on to publishers this month to support procuring materials to review. Inaugural review provides an opportunity to utilize our review criteria across multiple programs to calibrate and stay on the same page throughout the review, as well as to make improvements necessary based on testing across multiple programs. So at the end of the inaugural review, all the reports will be released together, along with the final review criteria and evidence guides. Publisher engagement has already begun. Our goal is to secure 5 biology courses to review, and we're also currently recruiting for educator reviewers and are aiming for at least 30 reviewers to sit on 5 teams. And as I mentioned before, reviews are anticipated to begin in May of this year. So to apply on the website, navigate to the About Us tab and click on Become a Reviewer. There you'll learn about the benefits and commitments of being a reviewer, as well as the link to apply. And we also want to acknowledge that there are other members of the Science Instructional Materials Review ecosystem. The Next Gen Science Peer Review Panel is currently accepting applications for high school reviewers. Both EdReports and the Next Gen Science PRP engage educators who have a strong understanding of the NGSS to collect evidence and review instructional materials. Both opportunities involve valuable professional learning, stipends for reviews, and collaboration with colleagues. While EdReports reviews entire programs, with each review lasting 4 to 6 months, the PRP reviews units or lessons and engages reviewers in quarterly review windows. So I really invite you to learn more about each opportunity by visiting their websites, and in the PDF of the slides that we linked, both systems are linked there as well. And educators are invited to apply for one or both opportunities. The EdReports website consists not only of reports of instructional material reviews, but we have some additional resources to support professional learning around instructional materials adoption processes and decisions. Some science-specific resources you may want to check out are listed and linked here. Also, the materials under review section of our webpage lists all materials that are currently under review or in queue. Because I saw a couple comments in the chat about that as well, so this is always a good place to look if you're wondering about something. And I'll also highlight the critical features document and the data snapshot, 2 other resources that are linked in that slide, as 2 very timely and relevant documents. While EdReports releases reports to provide information about the quality of instructional materials, if quality is not there, demand from the field is what can change that. So teachers, districts, and states are that demand, and they and you play a role in how the field changes. So hopefully some of these resources can support you in that work. We encourage you to utilize the resources on the website, Read the free reviews and stay informed about new reports and resources by signing up for our newsletter. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram to join the Materials Matter conversation. And most importantly, apply to be a reviewer. We'd love to have you, and we love engaging with educators. So we'd love to connect with you and support you as we all navigate high quality instructional materials together. Please reach out with questions, concerns, and comments. And you can also expect to receive a follow-up email from us to provide another opportunity to connect. And with that, I'd really like to extend a huge thank you to Trish and Minna for joining us today to share their expertise and perspectives. And thank you also to all of you for joining in. And we really look forward to connecting with you. So thank you so much. Please feel free to reach out with any questions. We're happy to stay on to answer questions in the chat as well.